In the shadowed corridors of Central High, a quiet girl's hidden legacy of darkness and redemption ignites a brutal act that shatters an unyielding hierarchy. Dare to uncover the secret that transforms cruelty into an unstoppable force of hope. In the heart of New York City, where towering skyscrapers cast long shadows over bustling streets, Central High School stood as both a beacon of promise and a stage for the darker dramas of adolescence. Its grand brick facade and sprawling sunlit corridors were celebrated symbols of academic excellence and the boundless potential of youth. Yet beneath this polished exterior lay a labyrinth of unspoken rules, a world where power was measured not by intelligence or kindness but by wealth, influence, and the ruthless ability to command fear. It was in this crucible of contrasting ideals that the story of Imani Carter began, a tale destined to unravel the mysteries of strength and vulnerability, challenge the conventions of power, and leave an indelible mark on every soul that encountered it. Imani, a quiet 14-year-old with eyes that shimmered like dark pools reflecting the secrets of an ancient past, navigated the corridors of Central High with a grace that belied the storms raging within. With skin as smooth and rich as the velvet night, and tightly woven braids that spoke of a heritage both proud and painful, she was a living testament to resilience. In a world where the loudest voices were celebrated and the flamboyant often ruled the day, Imani's silence was not a sign of meekness, but a deliberate, guarded armor against a culture obsessed with superficial accolades. Each step she took was measured, her presence a quiet defiance against a society that had long relegated her to the margins. The atmosphere of Central High was one of stark contrasts, a microcosm where the brilliance of youth clashed with the cruelty of unchecked ambition. In classrooms adorned with accolades and libraries filled with the dreams of future scholars, a subtler narrative unfolded. It was a story of those who were unseen, of hearts that beat in the shadows, and of souls that had learned to whisper their truths in a language too delicate for the boisterous halls. Here, popularity was not earned through genuine connection, but through an unyielding hierarchy where alliances were forged in the crucible of fear and conformity, and where the powerful made it their sacred duty to trample those who dared to be different. Amid this charged milieu, Imani emerged as a solitary figure, both enigmatic and compelling. While her peers reveled in the fleeting joys of cliques and the superficial glamour of high school life, Imani's inner world was a realm of quiet introspection and fierce determination. Her eyes, deep and reflective, held 1,000 unspoken stories. They spoke of nights spent in silent contemplation, of dreams that flickered like candlelight against the encroaching darkness, and of a secret reservoir of strength that grew with every trial endured. It was as if, from an early age, she had been destined to witness both the cruelty of the world and the beauty that lay hidden beneath its scars. Central High, with all its splendor and stark realities, was a battleground where the superficial glitter of popularity clashed with the enduring power of inner resolve. In the corridors, whispers of envy and ambition mingled with the sound of hurried footsteps, creating an almost palpable tension that resonated in every classroom and every locker-lined hallway. The very walls seemed to absorb the echoes of laughter and the stifled sobs of those whose spirits had been battered by the relentless pursuit of status. It was here that the true nature of power was laid bare, a power not measured by the volume of one's voice or the flashiness of one's possessions, but by the quiet, unyielding force of a soul that refused to be diminished. Imani's journey at Central High was marked by an ever-present duality. On the surface, she appeared as just another student, quiet, unassuming, blending into the background of a vibrant social tapestry. Yet beneath this exterior, there burned a fierce and secret fire. Her silence, often mistaken for indifference or passivity, was in reality a carefully honed shield, a way of protecting a spirit that had learned early on that vulnerability could be exploited. Every mocking glance, every whispered taunt aimed in her direction was met with a calm resignation that hid the storm gathering within. In those moments, as the world around her celebrated the clamor of youthful bravado, Imani's eyes betrayed a glimmer of something far more potent, a promise that one day the quiet would speak volumes. As the days unfolded in this prestigious yet perilous environment, hints of mystery began to swirl around Imani like an unseen current. There were murmurs among the students, snatches of conversation that spoke of her family, of a legacy that was as enigmatic as it was formidable. In the shadowy recesses of whispered gossip, it was said that her father, Xavier Carter, was a man of rare duality, a respected figure in certain circles, and a name spoken with both reverence and fear in the underworld. To the uninitiated, he was merely a distant, almost mythical presence. To those who knew better, he was a force of nature, a man who commanded loyalty through both benevolence and an iron-fisted resolve. Yet for Imani, he was simply Dad, a guardian whose love was as fierce as his reputation was formidable. This juxtaposition, the gentle warmth of home against the harsh glare of the outside world, imbued Imani with a unique perspective. She knew that true strength was not about how loudly one could assert dominance, but about the quiet courage to be oneself in a world that demanded conformity. Her father's shadow, far from being a burden, was a mantle of power that she carried with a mixture of pride and trepidation. The legacy of his influence, whispered about in hushed tones and laden with secrets, was a constant reminder that the world was far more complex than the simplistic judgments of high school life. It was a world where the lines between right and wrong blurred, where loyalty was both a shield and a weapon, and where every act of defiance had the potential to change the course of destiny. Walking through the halls of Central High, Imani felt the weight of expectations and prejudices pressing in on all sides. Yet, it was in these moments of isolation that she discovered the hidden depths of her own resilience. Every silent step was a testament to her unyielding determination to rise above the petty cruelties of those who sought to define her by her differences. As she passed by groups of laughing students and clusters of self-absorbed chatter, there was an undeniable aura about her, a quiet, magnetic force that drew the curious and the compassionate alike. Those who looked closely could sense that behind her reserved demeanor lay a story of struggle, triumph, and a relentless pursuit of something greater than the transient accolades of youth. In the interplay of light and shadow, in the gentle hum of a school filled with both dreams and disappointments, the stage was set for a revelation. The grandeur of Central High, with its ivy-clad walls and storied halls, was a microcosm of a larger, more intricate world. A world where appearances could be deceiving and where the true measure of a person lay in the depth of their character rather than the sheen of their reputation. It was here that the seeds of transformation were sown, nurtured by the unspoken understanding that every moment of cruelty, every act of silence, could be the catalyst for an awakening that would redefine the very essence of power. The air itself seemed charged with anticipation, as if the building held its breath in expectation of the unfolding drama. Every corridor, every classroom, was a silent witness to the unfolding narrative, a narrative that promised not only conflict but also the possibility of redemption. The quiet strength of Imani, so often overlooked in a world that prized the loud and the ostentatious, was a beacon of hope amid the chaos of social hierarchies and relentless judgment. It was a reminder that true power often emerges from the most unassuming places, that the quietest voices can carry the weight of a revolution, and that in the end, the human spirit is capable of transcending even the darkest of circumstances. There was an enigmatic quality to Imani's presence that defied easy explanation. It was as if she carried within her a secret, a truth so profound that it had the power to upend the established order. Her eyes, reflecting both the pain of past wounds and the promise of future triumphs, invited those who dared to look closer to question everything they thought they knew about strength and vulnerability. In a world where conformity was rewarded and deviation was met with scorn, her very existence was an act of defiance, a quiet rebellion against the forces that sought to diminish her worth. As the bell rang each morning, marking the beginning of another day filled with challenges and uncertainties, Imani stepped forward with a resolve that was both fragile and unbreakable. The sprawling corridors of Central High, lined with the echoes of countless footsteps, became a canvas upon which her silent story was painted. A story of perseverance, of quiet battles fought in the depths of the heart, and of a determination to carve out a place of dignity in a world that often sought to erase individuality. For those who passed her by without a second glance, Imani was merely a background figure in a grander, more ostentatious display of youth and ambition. But for those who took the time to truly see her, there was an undeniable magnetism, a mysterious allure born of quiet suffering and a fierce, unspoken promise of change. In every subtle gesture, every measured glance, there was a depth that spoke of uncharted territories of emotion and resilience. It was this complexity that would soon captivate the hearts and minds of all who encountered her, drawing them into a narrative that was as shocking as it was profoundly moving. The world outside the pristine walls of Central High was vast and unyielding, a realm where dreams could either flourish or be crushed by the relentless weight of reality. Yet within this microcosm of ambition and despair, Amani's story was just beginning to unfold. A story that would challenge the very notion of power, of identity, and of the courage it takes to stand alone in a crowd. As the secrets of the past intertwined with the uncertainties of the future, there emerged a tantalizing possibility that the quiet strength of one individual could spark a transformation that reverberated far beyond the confines of a school, reshaping lives and altering destinies in ways that no one could have ever imagined. In that charged atmosphere, where the echoes of laughter and the murmurs of whispered judgments mingled with the unspoken hopes of a better tomorrow, the stage was set for a dramatic collision of ideals. Central High was not merely a place of learning, it was a living, breathing testament to the contradictions of human nature. It was here, amidst the interplay of light and shadow, that the true story of Imani Carter would be told, a story of silent defiance, of a hidden power waiting to be awakened, and of the profound mystery that lies at the heart of every struggle for identity and self-worth. As the day wore on and the sun cast its fading glow through the tall windows of the school, the secrets of Central High grew ever more tantalizing. The silent corridors, filled with both whispered fears and quiet aspirations, bore witness to the slow but inexorable transformation of a young girl who had, against all odds, chosen to stand tall in a world that demanded conformity. In her every breath, in every step, there lay the promise of a beginning that would defy the established order and prove that true strength is not measured by the noise one makes, but by the courage to remain steadfast in the face of overwhelming adversity. And so, as dusk settled over the city and the bright lights of New York twinkled like distant stars, the story of Imani Carter was just beginning to take shape. In the interplay of dreams and reality, in the delicate balance between hope and despair, there emerged a narrative that was as haunting as it was beautiful, a narrative that beckoned the curious and the courageous to look beyond the surface and to discover the quiet, indomitable spirit that lay at its core. It was a story that promised to unravel the secrets of power and vulnerability, challenge the very fabric of social order, and leave an everlasting impression on anyone who dared to listen. In the midst of a winter afternoon that seemed to chill even the most ardent hearts at Central High, The inevitable moment of cruelty unfolded in a manner that left an indelible mark on every soul present. The atmosphere in the cafeteria, usually filled with the gentle hum of conversation and the clatter of trays, had taken on a different quality that day, one that was heavy with tension, anticipation, and the bitter taste of unprovoked malice. The fluorescent lights cast stark, unyielding shadows over the polished floors, and every student's eyes seemed to hold a secret mix of curiosity and apprehension as they sensed that something momentous was about to occur. At the center of this brewing storm was Tristan Brooks, whose reputation for cruelty had long been the dark undercurrent in the otherwise glittering social tapestry of Central High. With an air of unchallenged authority, Tristan moved through the throng of students as if he were the conductor of a silent orchestra, orchestrating each subtle gesture and every dismissive look. He had spent the morning basking in the adoration of his clique, his laughter echoing through the halls, a laughter that concealed a hunger for dominance and the desperate need to validate his own fragile sense of worth. Today, his predatory gaze was fixed upon Imani Carter, the quiet, unassuming girl whose calm composure had long made her an unwitting target. Imani sat alone at a far corner table, her presence a study in restrained dignity. She had chosen her seat not out of a desire to be isolated, but because she knew that solitude offered a refuge from the ceaseless scrutiny and the unpredictable tides of teenage judgment. Her dark eyes, which had witnessed more silent battles than most, now seemed to absorb the charged atmosphere of the cafeteria. As she carefully unwrapped her modest lunch, a simple, homemade peanut butter and jelly sandwich that carried with it the quiet love of a family that valued substance over extravagance, she remained oblivious to the predatory calculations unfolding nearby. Tristan's approach was deliberate and calculated. He sauntered over with a confidence born of entitlement, his entourage trailing behind him like a pack of sycophants eager to share in his emerging triumph. As he neared Amani, he exchanged a brief, dismissive glance with one of his followers, a signal that this was not merely a prank, but a carefully staged act of domination. With a swift, almost casual motion, Tristan reached out and knocked a few pieces of Amani's carefully arranged crackers from her tray. The sound of the crackers scattering across the pristine floor was punctuated by a ripple of laughter from his group, a laughter that was as cruel as it was momentarily satisfying for him. Imani's response was immediate yet silent. Her head remained bowed, and her hands moved with a deliberate grace as she stooped to retrieve the fallen crackers. Each movement was imbued with a quiet resolve, a stoicism that masked the storm raging beneath her calm exterior. In that fleeting moment, as Tristan's sneering comment cut through the murmurs of the cafeteria, "Come on, Imani, is that the best you can do?" A hush seemed to fall over the room. It was as though the collective heartbeat of every student had synchronized, each one caught between the instinct to laugh and the dawning realization that this was more than just a harmless joke. But Tristan was not content with mere minor mischief. His hunger for control demanded escalation, and with an air of theatrical bravado, he reached for Imani's unassuming lunch bag. In one swift, deliberate motion, he tore the bag open, exposing the simple sandwich that had been prepared with care. His eyes, alight with a perverse delight, scanned the room as if inviting every witness to share in his triumph. With a mocking laugh, he proclaimed, "Really? This is all you have? I guess your life is as bland as this sandwich." His voice, amplified by the charged atmosphere, reverberated off the walls, a clear declaration of his intent to reduce Imani to a symbol of weakness and insignificance. The reaction from the surrounding students was instantaneous and polarized. Some erupted into raucous laughter, their amusement untempered by any sense of empathy. Others, caught in the gravity of the moment, exchanged uneasy glances as they grappled with the discomfort of witnessing such unadulterated cruelty. For those who watched, the cafeteria transformed from a mundane gathering space into a theater of cruelty. where the actions of one individual served as a stark reminder of the power dynamics that pervaded every corner of their world. As Tristan's onslaught continued, the cruelty became more brazen. In a series of calculated gestures, he deliberately scattered the sandwich remnants across the immaculate floor, creating a tableau of humiliation that was both visually jarring and emotionally wrenching. His voice, dripping with scorn, echoed around the room. "Maybe your dad can't even afford a proper meal." Every word was a deliberate strike aimed at shattering Amani's already fragile sense of self-worth, designed to reduce her to nothing more than an object of pity and ridicule. In that moment, as Tristan reveled in the attention and the power of his actions, Amani's inner world was aflame with a complex storm of emotions. Pain, humiliation, and a profound sense of injustice mingled with a quiet, unyielding determination that refused to let her be defined by this one act of cruelty. Each insult, each sneer, became a spark that, unbeknownst to those around her, was fanning the flames of a deep-seated resolve to reclaim her dignity. There was one figure in the room whose eyes bore witness to the unfolding tragedy with a mix of sorrow and helplessness. A teacher named Ms. Daniels. Known for her compassionate heart and her steadfast belief in the inherent worth of every student, she had long been troubled by the unspoken rules of Central High. Yet even as she watched Imani endure the onslaught of ridicule, she found herself paralyzed by a sense of futility and the overpowering weight of the institution's culture. In her heart, a silent promise was made that change was inevitable, even if it was not her role to be the one to bring it forth at that moment. Beyond the immediate circle of witnesses, the digital realm stirred with the consequences of the incident. A student, perhaps moved by a mix of indignation and empathy, had captured a snapshot of Amani's expression, a look that conveyed both the depths of her pain and the quiet strength that belied it. Within minutes, the image began to circulate through social media channels, accompanied by biting hashtags and comments that oscillated between cruel mockery and tentative expressions of sympathy. In the modern age, where every moment could be immortalized with a click and shared with the world, the boundaries between public humiliation and personal trauma became irrevocably blurred. As the digital echoes of that fateful moment grew louder, the repercussions began to ripple outward, affecting not just Imani, but the entire fabric of Central High. Conversations, once dominated by trivial matters and fleeting gossip, now shifted to more profound reflections on the nature of power, cruelty, and the responsibility of those who bore witness to injustice. Some students, emboldened by the raw reality of the moment, began to question the very foundations of the social order that had long governed their lives. In hushed tones, in the quiet corners of the library, and in the secluded spaces of after-school gatherings, the idea that bullying was not a mere rite of passage, but a corrosive force that undermined the very essence of community took root. For Tristan, however, the incident was a carefully choreographed performance, an opportunity to cement his status as the unchallenged ruler of his domain. His outward display of cruelty masked an inner vulnerability, a hidden fear that the power he so eagerly wielded might one day crumble under the weight of its own excess. As he surveyed the scene with a self-satisfied smirk, he remained blissfully unaware that the seeds of his own downfall were being sown in the very moment he reveled in his perceived victory. Imani's experience in that moment of public humiliation was transformative in ways that were as subtle as they were profound. While the physical acts of cruelty were painfully evident, it was the emotional undercurrent, the quiet, steady resolve that began to take shape within her, that was perhaps most significant. Every mocking word, every dismissive gesture was etched into her memory as a reminder of a society that prized superficial strength over genuine human connection. And yet, within that very memory, a counterforce was born, a deep, unyielding determination to rise above the transient cruelty of the moment and forge a path defined not by the actions of her tormentor, but by the strength of her own spirit. In the days that followed, the repercussions of that singular moment of cruelty continued to reverberate throughout Central High. The image of Imani's downcast eyes and the scattered remnants of her sandwich became symbols of a deeper crisis, a crisis that transcended the boundaries of a single cafeteria or the narrow confines of a high school's social hierarchy. They served as a stark reminder that in a world where power was often measured by the ability to inflict pain without consequence, the true measure of strength lay in the capacity to endure, to reflect, and ultimately, to transform adversity into a catalyst for profound change. In the quiet solitude of her room, far removed from the prying eyes and echoing laughter of the cafeteria, Amani began to process the events of that day. The silence that enveloped her was both a refuge and a crucible, a space where the raw wounds of humiliation could begin the slow process of healing. In those moments of introspection, she confronted not only the external forces that had sought to diminish her, but also the internal demons of self-doubt that had long lurked in the shadows. The hurt was palpable, but so too was the spark of a burgeoning resolve, a promise that this moment, as painful as it was, would be the turning point in a journey toward reclaiming her own narrative. Within the walls of Central High, the incident began to unravel the carefully constructed facades of those who had once thrived on cruelty. Conversations took on a new gravity as students grappled with the realization that the power dynamics they had accepted as immutable were, in fact, subject to change. Whispers of solidarity replaced the once pervasive laughter, and a nascent awareness emerged that bullying, in all its forms, was a force that needed to be confronted head on. In the midst of this unfolding transformation, the digital realm played its part in amplifying the impact of that day. The viral nature of the captured moment ignited debates online, where young voices, once silenced by fear or apathy, found the courage to speak out against injustice. The image that had circulated so widely became a rallying point, a visual symbol of the need to stand up for those who were too often marginalized and mistreated. In countless digital discussions, the narrative shifted from one of ridicule to one of empathy and determination, as communities both within and beyond Central High began to question the status quo and demand a culture rooted in respect and accountability. For Tristan Brooks, the incident marked a moment of unsettling introspection, however brief and unacknowledged. While his immediate reaction was one of smug satisfaction, a lingering shadow of unease began to creep into his thoughts, a silent recognition that the dynamics of power were not as unassailable as he had once believed. In the echo of his own laughter, he could no longer entirely dismiss the possibility that his actions had not only wounded Amani, but had also exposed the brittle foundations upon which his own sense of superiority was built. As the echoes of that fateful day continued to reverberate through the hallways of Central High, the incident became a catalyst for a broader awakening. Teachers and administrators, once reluctant to confront the darker undercurrents of their institution, found themselves compelled to address the corrosive impact of unchecked cruelty. Initiatives were quietly set in motion, efforts to foster an environment where every student, regardless of background or circumstance, could find the support and understanding they deserved. In faculty meetings and after-school sessions, discussions emerged about the need for restorative practices, for avenues through which the wounds inflicted by bullying could begin to heal. In the midst of this evolving landscape, Imani's own inner transformation continued to unfold. The humiliation she had endured, as searing as it was, became a source of introspection, a mirror reflecting the need to redefine what true strength meant in a world that so often prized the superficial over the substantive. In the silent aftermath of that moment, as the campus settled into a reflective hush, Imani began to forge a new understanding of her own identity, one that was no longer tethered to the cruelty of others, but that was anchored in the quiet power of resilience and the unspoken promise of personal redemption. The incident, in all its painful detail, served as a turning point, a moment that would forever alter the course of lives and reshape the social fabric of Central High. It was a moment that revealed, in its starkest form, the duality of human nature, the capacity for both unspeakable cruelty and profound compassion. And while the scars of that day would linger, they would also serve as a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there exists the possibility of renewal, of transformation, and ultimately, of hope. As the day drew to a close and the cafeteria emptied of its transient occupants, the reverberations of the incident continued to echo in the quiet corners of the school. The silent resolve of Amani Carter, forged in the crucible of humiliation and ignited by a quiet determination to rise above it all, became a beacon for those who had long suffered in silence. In the wake of Tristan's calculated cruelty, the campus found itself at a crossroads, one where the choice between perpetuating a cycle of fear and embracing the possibility of change became painfully clear. In the cold light of that winter afternoon, as the final echoes of laughter faded into a lingering silence, the moment of cruelty that had unfolded in the cafeteria was no longer just an isolated act of bullying. It had become a catalyst, a spark that had ignited a slow-burning revolution in the hearts and minds of those who had borne witness. And for Imani, it marked the beginning of a journey that would challenge the very foundations of power and identity at Central High, and ultimately transform the campus into a place where every individual's worth could be recognized and celebrated. Every detail of that day, the shattered crackers, the defiled sandwich, the mocking words, would live on in the collective memory of the school, not as mere tokens of humiliation, but as symbols of the deep, unyielding truth that true power is forged in the crucible of suffering and reborn in the light of resilience. In the quiet aftermath of that fateful day, a new world began to emerge within Amani Carter, a world in which the pain she had endured transformed into an inner resolve that burned brighter than any outward display of anger or despair. In the solitude of her modest room, away from the prying eyes and echoing laughter of Central High, Imani sat with a pen in hand and a journal open before her, the blank pages soon becoming the sanctuary where her thoughts and emotions were laid bare. Here, in the gentle embrace of solitude, she discovered that her true strength did not reside in reacting to cruelty, but in understanding the depth of her own worth and the richness of her inner life. Each word she wrote was a step toward unveiling the hidden layers of her character, a process that allowed her to reclaim the parts of herself that had been bruised by the relentless tide of humiliation. The quiet scratch of her pen on paper became the sound of her resilience, a steady, measured cadence that marked the beginning of a personal revolution. In the soft glow of her desk lamp, Imani found solace in expressing the myriad emotions that had long been confined within her. The sorrow, the anger, the longing for recognition, all mingled with a surprising spark of hope, as if the very act of writing was alchemy, turning the leaden weight of her past into the gold of newfound determination. It was during these intimate moments of reflection that Imani began to grasp the profound truth that had always lingered beneath the surface of her existence. True power is not measured by the loudness of one's voice, but by the quiet courage to confront life's deepest wounds and to transform them into sources of light. She recalled memories of her childhood, where even in moments of quiet despair, there had been a tender strength in her father's steady presence. Xavier Carter, known to the world by a name that carried both awe and fear, was to Imani much more than a distant figure shrouded in mystery. To her, he was the embodiment of resilience, a man who navigated the harsh realities of a dangerous world with a blend of compassion and unwavering resolve. In the dim light of recollection, she remembered the gentle tone of his voice when he spoke to her about the importance of honor and self-respect, a lesson that had been passed down not through grand declarations, but through the silent, steadfast examples of his own life. Imani's journey toward self-realization was not an isolated endeavor. It was deeply intertwined with her creative pursuits, which blossomed as she began to explore the transformative power of art. She found that the act of painting allowed her to express emotions that words alone could scarcely capture. With each brushstroke on a canvas, Imani liberated a fragment of her soul. The vibrant swirls of color and the bold, abstract forms that emerged from her art were more than mere images. They were the visual expressions of her internal metamorphosis. In her paintings, the shadows of past hurts were softened by hues of hope, and the stark lines of her previous pain gave way to the fluid contours of healing. The process of creation became a mirror, reflecting back to her the hidden strength that had always resided within, a strength that was waiting patiently to be recognized and celebrated. As Amani's inner world flourished with the language of art and poetry, a subtle transformation began to ripple outward into her everyday life. In the halls of Central High, where once the eyes of her peers were filled with either indifference or condescension, there emerged an unspoken recognition of a change in her demeanor. Her once downcast gaze now carried a glimmer of defiant confidence, a quiet assurance that spoke volumes without the need for bold proclamations. It was not that the scars of humiliation had vanished. Rather, she had learned to integrate them into the mosaic of her identity, using them as a foundation upon which to build a future defined by self-respect rather than victimhood. The revelation of her inner strength did not occur in a single moment of epiphany, but rather through a series of subtle awakenings. There were days when the weight of her past seemed nearly unbearable, when the memories of cold words and isolating stares threatened to overwhelm her. Yet in those moments of darkness, she discovered that the true measure of resilience was found in the ability to endure and to rise again, like a phoenix emerging from the ashes. With every setback, Imani's determination deepened, and she began to see that every hurtful comment, every dismissive gesture, was not a reflection of her inadequacy, but rather a challenge to affirm her own worth. Through her struggles, she learned that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but a doorway to genuine connection and understanding. This growing awareness of her own hidden power sparked a quiet revolution within her. Imani began to share her art and her writing with a select circle of peers and mentors who recognized the sincerity and depth of her creative expressions. In intimate gatherings and small, heartfelt discussions, her voice, soft yet resolute, began to resonate with others who had long suffered in silence. Her words touched on universal themes of pain, loss, and ultimately, redemption, and in doing so, they opened up new avenues for empathy and healing within the community of Central High. The creative expressions that once served as private outlets for her emotions were now transforming into beacons of inspiration, inviting others to look within themselves and to confront their own vulnerabilities with courage. In the midst of this personal renaissance, Imani also began to explore the intricate layers of her heritage, seeking to understand the cultural legacy that had shaped her identity. She delved into the history and traditions that her family had passed down through generations, discovering in the rich tapestry of her ancestry a profound source of pride and resilience. The stories of her forebears, filled with struggles against adversity and the triumphs of the human spirit, provided her with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be strong. These narratives, woven into the fabric of her being, reminded her that true power was not something that could be taken away by the cruelty of others. It was an intrinsic part of who she was, a force that had been nurtured over time and that would continue to guide her in the face of any challenge. In quiet moments spent with her father, Xavier Carter, Imani sought solace and wisdom. Though his world was one of danger and calculated power, in the intimate setting of their home, he was a man of gentle reassurances. He spoke sparingly, but when he did, his words were laden with the kind of hard-won insights that only experience can bestow. He reminded her that the path to greatness was not paved with the fleeting accolades of external validation, but with the enduring commitment to live authentically and to stand firm in the truth of one's own worth. His eyes, often guarded and resolute in public, softened in those private moments, revealing a deep well of love and understanding that transcended the stark realities of their shared world. This quiet communion with her father, coupled with her growing immersion in the arts and her deepening exploration of her heritage, provided Imani with the strength to begin redefining her relationship with the world around her. She no longer viewed the cruel actions of others as definitive judgments of her value. Instead, she saw them as opportunities to affirm her own inner light. With every brushstroke, every carefully chosen word, she dismantled the narrative that had once sought to confine her within the narrow bounds of victimhood. In the process, she discovered that the true essence of her strength lay not in grand gestures or outward displays of defiance, but in the subtle, unwavering commitment to honor her own truth. In the quiet corridors of her mind, as she wove together the threads of her experiences with the vibrant tapestry of her creative expressions, Imani came to understand that her transformation was a deeply personal journey, one that was both liberating and empowering. The process of unmasking her hidden strength was an act of self-affirmation, a declaration that she would no longer allow the cruelty of her past to dictate the contours of her future. It was an evolution marked by a deep, abiding realization that every moment of suffering had prepared her for this awakening, that every tear shed in silence had contributed to the reservoir of resilience that now sustained her. As the days turned into weeks, Imani's newfound self-awareness began to manifest in subtle yet profound changes in her interactions with the world. Her demeanor grew more confident, her gaze more penetrating, and her quiet smile became a symbol of the unyielding spirit that now defined her. In conversations with friends and in the gentle exchanges with teachers who had once pitied her, there was an unmistakable air of dignity, a quiet assurance that she was, at long last, reclaiming her identity on her own terms. The transformation was not abrupt or ostentatious. It was a slow, steady evolution, much like the gradual unfurling of a flower after a long, harsh winter. In the reflective silence of her creative sanctuary, Amani began to write a series of poems that captured the essence of her journey. These poems, imbued with raw emotion and the clarity of hard-earned wisdom, spoke to the beauty that could arise from the depths of pain and the transformative power of self-acceptance. Her verses, delicate yet forceful, resonated with anyone who had ever felt marginalized or silenced. They became an anthem for those who had long suffered in the shadows, a reminder that even the most unassuming voice could rise to challenge the prevailing narratives of power and injustice. Through her art, her writing, and her quiet acts of courage, Imani embarked on a journey of unmasking her hidden strength, a journey that would eventually lead her to not only redefine her own life, but also to inspire others to discover the power within themselves. It was a revelation that unfolded gradually, like the slow breaking of dawn after the darkest night, illuminating the path to a future where every scar could be transformed into a symbol of resilience. And as she embraced this new chapter of her life, Imani Carter emerged as a beacon of hope, a living testament to the truth that true power is not bestowed by the cruelty of others, but by the quiet, indomitable force of a spirit that refuses to be broken. In that transformative space between vulnerability and strength, Imani discovered a profound truth that the journey towards self-realization is not marked by the absence of pain, but by the courage to transcend it. With every word penned and every stroke of her brush, she etched a narrative of rebirth and renewal, a narrative that whispered to the world that no matter how deeply one might be wounded, the capacity for healing and growth remains an unassailable human right. And in the steady, unyielding rhythm of her creative process, Amani found not only the unmasking of hidden strength, but the birth of a legacy that would inspire countless others to look within themselves and to reclaim the power that had always belonged to them. Thus, as the silent revelations of her journey continued to unfold, Imani Carter stood poised at the threshold of a new era, a time when the quiet, hidden strength of the human spirit would shine forth, illuminating even the darkest corners of a world long accustomed to cruelty. Her transformation was a profound reminder that while the scars of the past may never entirely fade, they can serve as the foundation upon which a future of dignity, creativity, and unyielding resilience is built. And in that sacred space of self-discovery and renewal, Imani finally embraced the truth that had been waiting within her all along, that she was not defined by the cruelty of others, but by the brilliant, unbreakable light of her own spirit. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface of Central High finally erupted in a confrontation that shook the very foundations of the school. It began subtly, with murmurs spreading among the students like wildfire, whispers that Tristan Brooks' reign of cruelty was no longer uncontested. In a moment that seemed to crystallize all the unspoken discontent, the social order was challenged in a way that no one could have foreseen. On a chilly afternoon, when the corridors hummed with anxious energy and the air was thick with anticipation, Tristan found himself isolated in a quiet hallway. There, he encountered Malik Brooks, his father, a man whose presence carried the weight of a legacy built on wealth and a ruthless assertion of dominance. Malik's normally polished demeanor was replaced by a steely intensity that betrayed a simmering frustration. His voice, calm but laden with authority, broke the silence as he said, "Tristan, there are consequences that extend beyond your petty theatrics. Today, you will learn that power is earned through respect, not fear." The word struck Tristan like a physical blow. In that brief exchange, the unassailable facade he had so carefully maintained began to crack. His eyes, once alight with the arrogance of unchecked power, now revealed a flicker of uncertainty. The encounter in the hallway was just the beginning. Soon, the ripple of tension extended to every corner of Central High, culminating in an impromptu assembly in the school auditorium where the entire community would bear witness to the collision of worlds. In the hushed auditorium, the atmosphere was electric with a mix of apprehension and expectation. Teachers, administrators, and even a few brave students had gathered, compelled by the need to confront the shifting dynamics that now threatened to upend the established order. At the center of this charged space, Amani Carter stood, not as the quiet victim of past humiliations, but as a symbol of resilience and unyielding dignity. Her presence, understated yet powerful, commanded attention without the need for a raised voice. It was during this assembly that the true nature of the confrontation unfolded. The principal, recognizing that the cycle of cruelty had to be broken, introduced a series of measures designed to restore dignity to those who had long been marginalized. Yet, it was not through formal declarations alone that the confrontation reached its zenith. In a moment that reverberated far beyond the walls of the auditorium, Imani herself spoke. Her words, soft yet imbued with an unwavering inner strength, challenged not only the bullies of Central High, but also the silent complicity of those who had allowed cruelty to flourish. Imani recounted her experience with a clarity that left little room for denial, a testimony to the pain inflicted by Tristan's actions, but also a declaration of the quiet power that had emerged in its wake. There was no bitterness in her tone, only a piercing truth that resonated with every listener. She spoke of the need for accountability and the courage to confront injustice head-on, even when it meant challenging those who had long held sway over the social order. In that moment, her voice became a beacon, illuminating the deep fissures in a system built on unchallenged dominance and prompting many to reflect on their own roles in perpetuating a culture of silence. As the assembly continued, the confrontation evolved into a broader dialogue between the two distinct worlds represented by the Brooks and the Carters. Malik Brooks, whose earlier exchange with his son had already set the tone, found himself drawn into a conversation with Xavier Carter, Imani's father. The meeting between these two figures, a collision of power and legacy, was charged with unspoken history and ideological differences. Xavier, known for his measured wisdom and the quiet strength that defined both his public persona and his private life, stood as a stark contrast to Malik's brash assertion of privilege. Their conversation was not one of overt hostility, but rather an exchange of principles, the recognition that true power does not stem from coercion and intimidation, but from a steadfast commitment to honor, accountability, and the protection of those who are most vulnerable. The dialogue between the two patriarchs, though brief, sent shockwaves through the school community. It underscored the reality that the consequences of cruelty reached far beyond the realm of high school politics, touching lives in ways that were both personal and far-reaching. As Xavier's measured words and calm demeanor resonated with the assembled faculty and students, the shift in the social fabric became undeniable. The auditorium, once a stage for the echoes of past cruelties, transformed into a forum for introspection, reconciliation, and the hopeful beginnings of change. For Tristan Brooks, the impact of the confrontation was immediate and profound. No longer insulated by the unquestioned authority of his social circle, he was forced to confront the vulnerability that lay beneath his bravado. The realization that his actions had consequences beyond the immediate gratification of ridicule began to weigh heavily on him. In the eyes of his peers, there was now a mixture of fear, respect, and for some, pity. A stark departure from the unchallenged superiority he had once enjoyed. The social order, it seemed, was shifting in ways that Tristan could no longer ignore. The events of that day set into motion a series of initiatives that would fundamentally alter the culture of Central High. In the days and weeks that followed, discussions about restorative practices and community responsibility took center stage. What began as a singular moment of confrontation evolved into a collective movement, one in which students, teachers, and administrators alike began to reimagine what it meant to be part of a community that valued empathy over exclusion, accountability over apathy. Through it all, Imani Carter remained a quiet yet powerful symbol of the possibility for transformation. Her courage in the face of adversity had not only challenged the prevailing narrative of power at Central High, but had also inspired a deeper, more meaningful dialogue about the values that truly define a community. In that moment of collision, where the old order clashed with a new, emerging consciousness, the school was forever changed. The confrontation had exposed the fragility of a system built on superficial dominance and had laid the groundwork for a future where respect, empathy, and genuine strength could flourish. The collision of worlds in that charged moment was not a violent upheaval, but a measured, emotional reckoning, a turning point that invited every member of the community to re-examine their own beliefs about power and responsibility. It was a reminder that the forces of change often begin with the courage of one voice, echoing through the hearts of many, until the entire world is compelled to listen. In the months following the pivotal confrontation, the corridors of Central High began to echo with a different melody, a song of healing and quiet revolution. The once bitter atmosphere was now slowly replaced by the tender murmur of redemption and growth. Imani Carter, who had weathered storms of cruelty and internal strife, emerged as a beacon of transformation. Her journey of self-discovery had not only altered the fabric of her own soul, but had also inspired a collective awakening among students and faculty alike. Imani's transformation was subtle, yet profound. In the soft light of early mornings and the gentle hum of after-school activities, she discovered a renewed sense of purpose that radiated from within. No longer defined by the harsh memories of humiliation or the scars of relentless bullying, she began to embrace the beauty of vulnerability. This new perspective allowed her to view her past as a series of lessons, each painful experience a stepping stone that had led her to a deeper understanding of her own strength. With every word she wrote, every brushstroke that graced her canvases, Imani redefined herself. Her art and poetry, once private sanctuaries, had blossomed into public expressions of hope and resilience. They spoke of a quiet rebellion against a system that had long valued superficial dominance over genuine human connection. At Central High, a tangible shift in the social landscape took root. The initiatives born from the fallout of past cruelties began to reshape the very ethos of the school. Student-led mentorship programs and restorative justice circles gained momentum, transforming classrooms into spaces where empathy and accountability were nurtured. In these forums, voices that had been silenced for so long found expression. Peers who once stood by in silence now actively engaged in conversations about healing and inclusion. The collective journey toward redemption was not merely about righting wrongs. It was about forging a future where every individual could claim their inherent worth without fear of retribution. Amidst this cultural renaissance, Imani's father, Xavier Carter, played a pivotal yet understated role. Known to the outside world as a formidable figure in the criminal underworld, Xavier was, to Imani, a source of unwavering love and quiet strength. In the warmth of their modest home, away from the judgments and expectations of the wider community, father and daughter shared long contemplative evenings. Xavier's measured words, often shared in reflective silences over a cup of tea, conveyed profound lessons on resilience, honor, and the transformative power of compassion. He taught Imani that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about embracing it as a necessary chapter in the larger story of growth. His guidance helped her understand that the truest form of strength lies in the ability to forgive, to rebuild, and to move forward with a heart that remains open to both joy and sorrow. For Tristan Brooks, the journey was more tumultuous. Stripped of the unchecked authority that had once defined his world, he was forced to confront the reality of his actions. The cruelty he had wielded so carelessly left deep fissures in his own identity. In the quiet moments of self-reflection that followed the confrontation, Tristan grappled with a profound sense of regret, a realization that the power he had once flaunted was as fleeting as it was destructive. His path to redemption was neither swift nor straightforward. It was a rugged road marked by internal battles and the slow rebuilding of trust with those he had wronged. In therapy sessions arranged by caring school counselors and through earnest apologies made in the quiet corners of the school, Tristan began the arduous process of atonement. The transformation was tentative at first, but gradually, as he embraced responsibility and demonstrated genuine remorse, the community's hardened perceptions began to soften. His journey became a testament to the belief that even the most deeply ingrained patterns of cruelty could be unraveled through sincere introspection and the willingness to change. As the season shifted and the harsh chill of winter gave way to the hopeful warmth of spring, Central High itself became a symbol of renewal. The physical space transformed alongside the hearts of its occupants. Walls that had once been stained with echoes of past conflicts now bore murals celebrating unity and perseverance. Classrooms that had been arenas of silent judgment evolved into collaborative hubs where ideas were shared freely, and every voice was valued. The spirit of redemption permeated every facet of school life, from the organized Day of Empowerment events to spontaneous acts of kindness that occurred in the hallways. In these moments, the legacy of cruelty was gradually replaced by the promise of a future built on understanding, respect, and a shared commitment to nurture the best in one another. In this renewed environment, Imani emerged not as a solitary figure burdened by her past, but as a leader whose quiet determination had inspired an entire community. Her creative expressions, now showcased in public exhibitions and celebrated during school assemblies, became a rallying point for change. Peers who had once looked upon her with indifference now saw in her a living example of courage and resilience. Her journey, punctuated by both hardship and triumph, ignited conversations that reached far beyond the walls of Central High. The story of Imani Carter transcended the personal to touch upon universal themes of transformation and hope, resonating with anyone who had ever struggled to find their voice in a world that often seems indifferent. In the end, the path toward redemption and growth was not marked by grand gestures or dramatic proclamations. Instead, it was a slow, deliberate process of healing, one that required the courage to confront painful truths, the humility to seek forgiveness, and the determination to forge a new path forward. For Imani, Tristan, and the entire community of Central High, the new dawn that broke each day was a reminder that every ending held the promise of a new beginning. The scars of the past, though never completely erased, became symbols of the resilience that lay at the heart of the human spirit. They were a testament to the fact that true strength is not defined by the absence of pain, but by the ability to rise, time and again, in the face of adversity. As the school year advanced and the future beckoned with the bright promise of renewal, Central High stood as a living testament to the transformative power of redemption. In the harmonious blend of voices now united in purpose, in the quiet determination etched on the faces of those who had once been broken, there existed an unspoken vow, a vow to honor every individual's worth and to build a community where empathy and accountability reigned supreme. And in this community, Imani Carter's journey from silence to self-realization illuminated a path of hope, inspiring not only her peers, but all who believed in the possibility of change. In reflecting on the journey of Imani Carter, we witness a powerful transformation that speaks to the core of what it means to overcome adversity and reclaim one's identity. Imani's story begins in the hallowed halls of Central High School in New York City, a place where the outward trappings of success and privilege mask a darker undercurrent of cruelty and rigid social hierarchies. Initially, Imani is introduced as a quiet, unassuming 14-year-old with deep, reflective eyes and a steadfast demeanor that belies the inner storm she endures. She navigates a world that prizes popularity and superficial charm, all while carrying the weight of her own unique heritage and the unspoken legacy of her father, Xavier Carter, a man whose formidable reputation in the underworld stands in stark contrast to the tender care he shows at home. The turning point in Imani's life comes on a cold winter afternoon in the school cafeteria when Tristan Brooks, a student known for his ruthless behavior, deliberately targets her with acts of cruelty. What unfolds in that charged moment is not merely an isolated incident of bullying, it is a calculated assault on Imani's dignity, a public spectacle designed to reinforce a social order that thrives on fear and exclusion. As Tristan's actions escalate, from knocking crackers from her tray to ridiculing her modest lunch, the entire atmosphere of the school shifts. The cafeteria, once a space of casual chatter and shared meals, becomes a theater of humiliation where every mocking word and every sneer is etched into Imani's heart. Yet, amidst this storm of cruelty, Imani's inner strength begins to emerge. Rather than succumbing to the pain, she retreats into a world of introspection, In the quiet of her room, armed with a pen and journal, she begins to translate her suffering into words. Each written line becomes a small act of defiance against the injustice she has faced. Her journey of self-discovery unfolds through the gentle exploration of art, poetry, and reflection. With every brushstroke on her canvas and every carefully crafted verse, Imani dismantles the narrative of victimhood that had been imposed upon her. Through these creative expressions, she comes to understand that her true power lies not in reacting to cruelty, but in embracing her identity with quiet determination. Imani's inner transformation is not an isolated metamorphosis. It ripples outward, gradually altering the very fabric of Central High. The campus, which had once been marred by a culture of exclusion and unchecked dominance, begins to shift as her example inspires those around her. Fellow students start to question the status quo and recognize that true strength is found in resilience, compassion, and the courage to be authentic. The silent bystanders, and even some of those who once reveled in cruelty, find themselves drawn to the quiet revolution taking place within their community. In this way, Imani's personal journey becomes a catalyst for collective healing and change, transforming the toxic atmosphere of the school into one where empathy and accountability can flourish. A significant part of Imani's growth is intertwined with her relationship with her father, Xavier Carter. Although known to the world as a formidable crime boss, Xavier embodies a complex duality. At home, he is gentle, wise, and profoundly supportive. His unspoken lessons, shared in moments of quiet intimacy over cups of tea or through the soft cadence of his reassuring words, teach Imani that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about embracing it as an essential part of one's journey toward self-empowerment. Xavier's unwavering support fortifies Imani's resolve, allowing her to see that the scars of her past, rather than being marks of shame, are symbols of survival and resilience. His influence reinforces the idea that the true measure of a person is not determined by the cruelty of others, but by the inner strength cultivated through adversity. Simultaneously, the fallout from Tristan Brooks's actions forces him to confront his own vulnerabilities. Stripped of the unchecked authority that once defined him, Tristan faces a reckoning with the consequences of his behavior. His path toward atonement is steeped in introspection and the painful recognition that the power he wielded through cruelty is inherently unstable. In this collision of worlds, the hardened cruelty of one and the quiet fortitude of the other, the campus begins to evolve. The dialogue that ensues is one of restorative justice and collective accountability, where every individual is invited to reassess their own values and the impact of their actions on the lives of others. As the seasons change and the harsh winter yields to the hopeful warmth of spring, Central High itself transforms. Murals celebrating unity and resilience replace the grim reminders of past cruelties. Initiatives that promote empathy, peer support, and community engagement take root, creating a nurturing environment where every voice is valued. The once fractured community slowly coalesces into a place where differences are not only tolerated, but celebrated as the source of collective strength. Imani Carter, through her creative expressions and unwavering inner resolve, becomes a symbol of this transformation, a living testament to the power of redemption and the promise of new beginnings. The profound lesson that emerges from Imani's journey is one of self-empowerment and the transformative nature of resilience. Her story teaches us that true strength is not about the loudest voice or the most forceful action, but about the quiet determination to rise above adversity. It reminds us that every act of cruelty, no matter how painful, can serve as the foundation for a future defined by hope and renewal. In a world that often measures worth by external accolades, Imani's experience is a powerful call to look within and recognize that our true value lies in our ability to endure, to learn, and to ultimately transform our wounds into wisdom. For those navigating the challenges of modern life, Imani's story offers timeless insights. It encourages us to embrace our vulnerabilities as opportunities for growth and to understand that the hardships we face are not endpoints, but rather stepping stones on the path to self-discovery. By acknowledging our pain and choosing to transform it into creative energy, we can break free from the cycle of victimhood and build lives marked by genuine strength and compassion. This message is especially relevant today, as we encounter a world where division and strife can easily overshadow our shared humanity. Imani's journey is a reminder that every challenge holds the promise of renewal, and that the courage to be authentic can ignite profound personal and communal change. As you reflect on Imani's transformative journey, consider the ways in which you too can harness the power of resilience in your own life. Let her story inspire you to confront your struggles with honesty, to seek out the lessons hidden in every setback, and to celebrate the unique strengths that define who you are. Embrace the idea that every hardship carries within it the seed of a new beginning, a dawn of possibilities that can lead to a life of deeper meaning and fulfillment. Thank you for taking the time to immerse yourself in this journey of redemption, growth, and new beginnings. If you found this story as moving and inspiring as Amani's journey, please consider subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you not only support our work in bringing you compelling and transformative stories, but you also join a community dedicated to celebrating resilience, compassion, and the unyielding spirit of the human soul. Stay with us as we continue to explore narratives that inspire, educate, and empower. Together, we can build a future where every challenge is met with courage and every voice is valued.